We can use data validation to restrict the type of data or values that users enter into cells. Assuming we are responsible for compiling certain information about projects within our company, and we want the entries to be precise, well-structured, and restricted, we can create an Excel worksheet that achieves these goals. For this lesson, we are using the data validation file. And in this file, we want to capture the names of the project leads, their position, the project ID, and the status of the project. And when we look at sheet 2, in sheet 2, we have all the possible names of the project leads. We have the positions as well as the different possible project status. And all we're trying to do is we want to enforce that users or the people who will be entering information can only select from the options that we have available here. So how do we do this? So let's go back to sheet 1. The first thing we need to do is, so now we want to create a drop-down list within the project lead column. We select that column, so we select row 2. And then we go to under data, we want to go to data validation. So click on data validation. And here we have the first option says allow any value, but that's not what we want. We want to restrict the value. So what we want to do here is to select list. So we select list. And then for the source, we click on this icon. And now we go to sheet 2, and what we want to do is we want to select the range of possible values or options that we want users to be able to enter. In our case, it will be this range. So we're selecting from row 2 up to row 10. And all we need to do, and we can see that here, and now we just select this icon again, and we click OK. A drop-down list has now been created for us. Now we do this for position, we can do the same thing. So we click on data validation, drop down, click on list because that's what we want. For the source, we click on this icon. Now we go back to where we have our values. For the position, we do the same thing. We click this icon and OK, and now we have the drop-down list. For the project ID, we will let the user enter the ID themselves, but we will perform some restriction on that shortly. So for the project status as well, let's click on data validation, select list, and we go back to our list. And for this, we have 3 possible options. Okay. And now we have those options available for us. Now the next thing we want to do is because clearly we see that we don't have the drop down available, and if we expect, and say we're expecting potentially 10 records to be entered or 10 project leads to enter their names and the different statuses of the project, then it means we want to create more. So all we need to do in this situation is we can just select all the rows that we want. So let's say we just want the next 13 rows. So we select including this row, and then we go back to data validation. And now we get this pop-up that says the selection contains some cells without data validation settings. Do you want to extend data validation to these cells? And all we need to do is click yes, and then we click OK. When we go back to our list, we see that we now have that drop down available for the other rows as well. And we just do the same thing for position and project status. We have successfully created the drop-down list which users can select from. So let's say Juan Pereira, we have the name, and from the position, we can select a position, say is a senior director, project ID, I will come back to project ID shortly, but I would say 1000, and let's say the status is started. Assuming project IDs within our company is always a combination of letters and numbers. Let's say the first 2 characters are letters, and then the next 4 values are numbers. Like we have something like, I'm going to type here. Let's say we have, it's usually something like this, HG6554 or we could have something like BU7234, whatever the case may be. But essentially, the first two characters are letters, and then we followed by 4-digit numbers. But we only want the users to enter numbers. We don't, maybe for some reason, we don't need them to enter the letters. We only need them to enter the numbers. We can enforce that rule within that column. So first we go to that column and we select the next cell, click on data validation, and what we want to do is under settings, now instead of going with list, we have the option to choose all numbers. So when we choose all numbers, and we can also select a range, so we can say the numbers will be between 1000 and let's say 7000. So all our project IDs fall within this range, right? Now what we can also do is in the input message, we can also state, say, enter numbers only, right? And we'll see what that looks like. Another thing is that we can set up error alert. So in the situation in which the user enters something outside of what we've defined, what do we want to happen? So we can say an error message is going to pop up, and we can just tell the user enter numbers between let's say 1000, because that's what we defined, to 7000. So now let's go ahead and click OK. So what we notice is that right now you see now it enter numbers only. So this sort of prompts the user what to do. Okay, and let's say the user chooses to ignore this and enters let's say BA2222 and enter. Now we get a pop-up error message that says enter numbers between 1000 and 7000. All right. And because we've not defined the remaining cells, we can just copy the next 13 cells, and we go back to data validation, we click yes, and we click OK, and now we have it replicated in all the other rows. I'm going to delete these two values because we don't need that anymore. Another thing we can do is add color to the cells based on certain input. In the project status column, we may want the cell to be highlighted as yellow for started, green for completed, and red for past due. We have the three different statuses, and we just want it to be highlighted based on whatever status is chosen. For that, all we need to do is we go to the Home tab, we click on Conditional Formatting, move your mouse to highlight cells rows, and what we want to select is equal to. So for the equal to, this is where we indicate the different statuses within the cells. So let's say we have started and we want the color to be, let's say we want the color to be yellow. All right, we click on, I'm actually going to cancel this. Let's select all the rows we want to be affected. I'm going to select the next 14 rows or 13 rows. And now let's go back to Conditional Formatting and then equal to. And now let's select started. And we can change the color to yellow. Click OK. Go back there. Equal to, and now we want the next status, which we just completed, and we can choose green for this. Okay, and then the final one. And we can select the color red for this. So and we click OK. So now what happens is that, and we can see that already, once it's completed, it's green. If they select past due, then it is red. We can add or delete values from the drop-down list. Let's assume we have a new project lead and we want to include the name of the project lead to our drop-down list. All we need to do is go to Sheet 2 where we have the list of the names and add the name right here. Now what I would also say is we don't actually want to add the name to the next row. So let's say the next project lead's name is Alex Felix, and now if we go back to our drop down, we notice that we don't see the name. What I would recommend is that and there are a couple of ways we can add, but this is somewhat the easiest way to add new values. So what I would suggest is just add the new name in between, not as the last, as a node, into another row. Just add it anywhere between the first row and the last row. So we can let's just select that row, press down on the Shift key on your keyboard, and let's just drag this anywhere else. So let's say we drag it to row 8. Now if we go back to Sheet 1 and click on our drop down menu, now we see Alex Felix. All right, and if we want to delete, we can of course delete. So this time around, let's say we want to delete from Alex to Toby, and let's just select all that, and when we click on delete, that's deleted. If we go back to our sheet, we notice that we don't have any of those project lead anymore.